Yeah, I get that, and I understand that thought process on a couple of fronts. For me, you know, it is what it is. As a paid official, if I turn up to a particular country or event and they say do this, I can do it. You know, off the cuff. But I think we're kind of masters of our own destiny or creators of our own downfall in that side, because, as you rightly say, even before the added confusion of the revised rules, you know, fans and some fighters and everybody they weren't on the same page then in terms of understanding the rules. Now, when you have an addendum to the rules, a revision and an update, they're being used in some places, they're not being used in some places, so it's kind of muddied the waters even further. And I do feel for people, you know, you guys, press, media, fighters, fans, everybody around the world in different places, sometimes they're not sure what they're looking at. Definitely, I can see that. And look, but by that, me saying that I'm going to be ever ready, you know, by the same token, I know I'm a human being, but don't make a mistake. You know, that's something that we abide by. But yes, some of the guys coming through that maybe don't have the consistency of work, or they don't have the regularity that me and the other guys get week in, week out, month in, month out. If those guys are a bit sporadic in their work, depending on where they're going to be, they're going to get caught out, and I do feel for them, because, you know, it's bound to happen. For me personally, 1,000,000%, I'm in agreement. You know, that's part of my responsibility, as we're touching on with the IMMAF. That's something that I do. You know, getting everybody on the same page. We're still a million miles away from that. You know, MMA has different guises and different setups in different parts of the world. I'm not saying we're gonna change things overnight, but by the same token, you know, unified MMA, both for professionals and for amateurs, it's a constant work process. Getting people just when you think you're turning the corner, just when you think you're turning the page to get more people to understand. Then I didn't see this confusion arising when they had the voted revision, the changes last August, if memory serves me correctly, due to come in to start in January this year. I didn't foresee that so many states were going to elect not to adopt them, and I think that's kind of like the beginning of where the confusion is. When we move to other countries, certainly the countries that I've been working in, they're quite readily accepting of the changes, and they want to move to them pretty quickly. But it's a constant process, you know, and for the evolution of the sport, for the standardisation of the sport, and for the fairness of everybody involved, you know, obviously the sooner we get there, the better it's going to be. I don't know, I mean, obviously I can only talk for myself on that front, but for me, you know, I find myself in a privileged position. You know, every time I step into another country or work with the UFC or whatever it may be, you know, it's a privileged position. It's not something that came from you know, luck. It's something that came from circumstance and many years dedicated to the sport. But in terms of using that influence to try and get everybody on the same page, no, I do speak out. But by the same token, I give respect to look in the US. You know, people have often looked towards the US for the adoption and adaptation of. That's where the unified rules were born. It's something I've always leaned to from my time as an official. And in terms of taking that and trying to push that forward to as many people, other people of influence, promoters, etc. Like I said, you know, we're still a young sport. I try and say that to people when I do the seminars for referees and judges. Like it or not, the sport as we know it was born in 1993. A lot of people will be screaming at me right now, but I'm used to that. A lot of people are screaming at me right now. They'll talk about vale tudo, pancration. Yes, the sport has been around in various forms for many, many years before that. But I'm talking the sport as we know it now. You know, it's the acronym of UFC. You say to people MMA, the layman, the man in the street, MMA, huh? And you say UFC. Ah, yeah, I understand it. You know, trying to get everybody into the same mindset and whatnot in terms of regulation. It's like I say, without sounding cliche, it's just, we just keep cracking the whip and just keep working hard, keep our heads down, keep trying to get everybody on the same page. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not even sure it's going to be in my lifetime. You know, you look at the sport of, you look at what we're doing next door with the IMMAF. Something that I've been trying to do in recent years is to get a recognition. I mean, you think that professional MMA is fragmented, amateur MMA is even more fragmented. I'm trying to get the adoption of a single unified rule set for that, keeping it as closely aligned. What we want to do is make the transition for young athletes at an amateur level to a professional level as close as possible, but on the same token, or by the same token, giving credence and giving extra thought process to the safety. That's why when you look at the fighters, you know, they're fighting the 3-minute rounds, they have the added protection. There's an aesthetic value there as well, something that MMA is miles away from. In boxing, I can turn on the TV in Canada, in Australia, I can turn it on in Russia or Brazil, and I know amateur boxing when I see it. We're a million miles away from that in amateur MMA. But take it from me, the leaps and bounds that IMMAF have made in particular for amateurs in the last 3 or 4 years is kind of unprecedented. I mean, to me, obviously, amateurs, I mean, when I was first involved with the sport, amateur was pretty much non-existent. It was ranged anywhere from not heard of to non-existent. That's how prevalent it was. But I think, you know, as the sport advances, etc., people can see a definite career path now with MMA, because the sport has become so much more accepted, or the dreaded mainstream, etc. You're looking at getting people from different disciplines, judokas, wrestlers, boxers, whatever it may be, trying to push those people into, they can see a career path beyond their sport. And if you look at any other sport, our closest relative that I would say is boxing. You know, you get young amateurs sometimes with bouts up into the hundreds, and I'm not saying that can directly translate for MMA. I would like to see it like that in many more years to come. But even now, you know, I've kind of wrote about it in articles saying that there's kind of like a weird, or you know, a horrible notion in MMA. You've had 7, 8, 9, 10 amateur fights and you think you're super experienced. Well, actually, guess what? You're not, you know. But obviously with bona fide tournaments like IMMAF, a true world championships, you know, that they've had for the last 3 years, the Asian Open, the European Opens, the South African Opens. The amateur scene is something that will always stay close to my heart, and I'll try and do what I can to get people educated, you know, in that mold. It's like anything. I don't graduate from college straight to, you know, whatever industry it is. I have to go through the stages and the processes, experience, time served, etc. That's what I want to see for MMA in the long term. Obviously, the premise of IMMAF is to develop the grassroots of the sport, for, you know, giving the fighters, you know, that level playing field. But it's also the same for the officials too. For fighters that get experience and continuity, it's the same for officials, referees and judges. And I help oversee the regulatory side, both in terms of doing seminars globally for IMMAF, getting everybody onto the same page. And then when it comes to the actual events, being there to help assign the judges, look after them, get them all together. And I'm very privileged. It's something that I look forward to, because it takes me back a bit, you know, and I feel like it's giving something back to the sport as well, because it's solely geared around amateurs. For sure, you know, the easiest, it's funny you say that, and I'm laughing because from what I see, our fans, you know, the fans of, when I say our, not mine, before they start scolding me about that, you know, the social media and the internet, man, it's relentless. It's relentless. But, you know, I do try and, like, people have actually, I'm pretty pragmatic as a person, and I don't hold back on what I want to say. Sometimes my social media kind of detracts that, because a lot of people are like, man, your patience is incredible. But I understand that there is a lot of, you know, passionate people out there, and passionate people that want to learn. and they want to get involved with the sport. And of course, look, not everybody can become a fighter, and I don't think that's everybody's chosen path anyway. But in terms of anybody who wants to give something back to the sport, and you can take that across any industry, there's ways and means of doing it. And I would kind of implore, you know, anybody, no matter what the country, to, if that's what they want to do. Obviously, different countries have different regulations. You guys in the US, for instance, have state ACs, commissions and regulatory bodies. Certain countries in Europe do the same. But yeah, young blood, new blood in any aspect of any sport, particularly on the official side, I would encourage it where they can, but you need to be willing to do it. And yeah, go and seek out your local shows, try and get involved. And if you're that passionate, if you really are that intent on making a difference, then you will. What drives me to do it? I'm in love with this sport. It's as simple as that, you know, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't do what I did. You know, I've grown up with it. I've been involved directly with MMA for 17 years, you know, martial arts in various forms before that, but in MMA, 17 years, 14 of those years as an official. If you didn't love it, it would show, you know. I've always said, like, to people that, you know, passion, true passion, is a very honest thing. It's a very truthful thing. And if you are passionate about something, it will show. I've saw so many people, you know, become involved in this sport, you know, fair weather, 5-minute people, you know, how long have you been around the sport, John? You'll see it yourself, but from my own personal point of view, you know, you look at Herb, John, the guys who, the mainstay guys, and many other guys, of course, besides that. For me, it's just, I'm passionate about this thing, you know. Like I said, you cut me in half and I bleed MMA. I'm in love with this sport. Sometimes to my wife's detriment, as she will, as she'll testify. She'll say, you know, it's like me or that, it's her or it. But I just want to make a difference, you know. And it's like I said about the social media side. There's so much more I want to say now, but even now, you know, I'm still in the realms of professionalism. I would like to be more honest in what I think, but by the same token, I'm not going to let my guard down and let those people, you know, I don't want to be condescending to the people outside of the sport, but they really can't get an appreciation for what an official has to do. And like I said, you know, it's not a role for everybody. And like I said, the number of years that I've been involved, because you get the highs and the lows in terms of, you know, you stand by your decisions. And if you weren't in love with it, you wouldn't be there. It's like any relationship. If things are going bad and you didn't like it and you didn't love it, you'd go. And that's why, you know, the long-serving people in this sport are still there year after year, because you accept what's good, you accept what's bad, and you try and make a difference. And sorry about going on, but, you know, when you're talking, it's very nice that you say about, you know, people say that about the best this, the best that, and being regarded. The way I see it, there's 7.5 billion people on this planet. Being regarded in the top 5, 10 of everything, that'll do me nicely. I don't care about 1, 2, 3. I really don't care about being the best. I do care about being the best, but what I want to be the best at is the best version of me. It doesn't concern me. It's a matter of opinion, you know. We have some fantastic officials in this sport, you know, Big John being at the top. And I say that, you know, openly and honestly, you know, quite literally, the guy who wrote the rule book. And the difference is, you know, me and John talk, but the difference is when you see someone like that, not only is he still at the top, but he's still performing at the top. He's still making the same calls at the same level, week in, week out. And I don't concern myself with being the best. I'm patient. I just want to make a difference. I'm doing my thing, and I'm happy doing it. I would certainly like more harmony and acceptance when it comes to the rule set. That's a given, you know. Like I said, fans and detractors of the sport will pour enough negativity on us. And even now I'm looking for a reason to give it back to them, because in terms of, I can understand why they get confused about the rules, but it's like anything. There is some fantastic fans out there, you know, not ignorant people, and it's you know, like I said, social media. The funniest thing I ever heard about social media was from John Kavanagh, and he summed it up perfectly, you know. Like, something I always live by was social media. The best thing about social media is you can have direct access to somebody. The worst thing about social media is you can have direct access to somebody. But he went beyond that, and he said, look, social media is why they, as an analogy, social media is why they print "do not eat" on bags of silica. You know, when he told me that, I was just like, it's so, you know, it makes so much sense. But in all honesty, you know, forgetting that, for me, harmony on adaptation of the unified rules. It's no secret, the more people doing the same thing is going to lead for greater clarity for everybody involved in the sport. That's a given, you know. Like I said, it's probably not going to be in my lifetime. There will always be different guises of MMA in different parts of the world, you know, in the Far East, etc., etc. Are they ever going to adopt full unified MMA? Probably not. Is that the end of the world? Who cares? You know, I'm not concerned about that. And the second thing that, as I said before, alluded to before, is the importance of the amateur side of this sport. You know, obviously the UFC are very heavily linked and have done nothing but support the amateur side of the sport in terms of the IMMAF. If more people got involved in that, and just to see how much difference that makes. And we're at the formative years of this, you know, I keep saying about it might not be in my lifetime. If I've played a small part in that, then, you know, I'll die a happy man, as long as the sport progresses and the amateurs keep coming through. And I think it's going to be many more years from now before we see, you know, I think it's still rising, and obviously it's going to reach a certain plateau, but I'm still positive about that, you know, about MMA in all its guises. And like I said, if you weren't in love with it, you wouldn't be so. I mean, I'm going to be 43 this year, and like I say, you know, 14 years as an official. I've been working with the UFC now, coming into the 10th year. So, you know, like I said, I think I've easily got another. I don't know. It's probably, if you ask me or ask my wife, it'd be two different questions. But look, as long as I'm in love with this game, and as long as I can consistently do what I'm doing at the highest level, I think my own body and my own mind will tell me that, you know, when enough's enough. I think if you look at boxing referees, I think the career longevity for an MMA referee will be slightly less than what it would be in boxing. And I go back to John. I'm not going to give away his age. He can say that. But John's still, like I said, the guy who wrote the rule book. He's been around longer than anybody, and he's still going strong. He's still making the right calls in the right places at the right time. And he's older than me. I'm not going to say by how much, so I know I've still got plenty to offer.